Okay, America, back with another segment about the life story of Mr. David Lee Mack, at least the last year of his life anyway. Listen, again, as I said before, you see, there's no unity here with black people. So it's just like only a few of us that are trying to seek justice for Mr. David Lee Mack. Black people here, again, they're so passive. They won't stand up for their women. Their children get killed, or their father, their brothers, whatever. They will not do anything. They'll just sit back and say, oh, well, that's just what they do. And they tell me all the time, you better leave this alone. They're going to do something to you. Well, listen, people just don't understand. Everything that happens up under the sun is, God's reason. God intends for this to happen. So this is why I'm doing this, because this is God's will. Now, you would have to be very wicked or evil, or I don't know what word to use, if you don't want me to do this and you want this to stay covered up. You're just as worse, again, as I said, as the ones that killed Mr. Mack and covered it up. The different governmental agencies here. So listen, what we've got to learn to do is we've got to learn to stand up and, and fight. That's why we're not respected here, blacks as a whole, because we don't stand up for anything, and there's no justice. Several people have asked me, why don't you go to the NAACP and see if they will help? The NAACP, it doesn't do anything here. I'm not going to say it never has done anything, but in recent years it doesn't do anything at all. So that's why we don't go to them. The only time they come out and show their presence is when they want to get votes, or when they want to go to banquets and accept awards. Other than that, there's no NAACP here. It's just a building. So this is why we have to do this on our own. Okay, back again. Now, in the next segment later this week, I'm going to show you and tell you about Deborah Russell. Her and her husband owns a newspaper over in Homicide Springs, Florida, which is West Florida again, and she was brave enough. She did a perfect story on what happened to Mr. Mack. Now listen, she wanted to do a made-for-TV movie about what happened to this man, but someone ran her off, and we understand that, or maybe she was intimidated, but we understand that, and we give her nothing but props for what she did do. Thank you so much, Ms. Russell. Now I'm going to tell you something. When I first started on this case in 2009, one of the Marion County Sheriffs Department officials was talking so much until she told me that Art King, who worked for the Sheriff's Department at the time, she said that he was assigned to Mr. Mack's case, which, like I told you again, there was no incident report, there was no investigation. So I don't know what Art King's role was, but I do know that Art King is still alive. Art King, you're going to have to give some answers to what happened during this cover-up. In fact, Sheriff Darmoreland, ex-Sheriff Darmoreland, you're still alive. You're going to have to answer to this too. In other words, all the ones that are still alive that played a part in Mr. Mack's death and cover-up, you're just going to have to answer to it. That's why God still got you hanging around here on earth, because you have to pay for what you did to this man. And as again, I said, you took him away from a beautiful family. This man had a very, very beautiful family, and you just took him away. Don't understand why you did that, but you did it. And, I mean, they've had to live with this all their life, knowing that their father was murdered. Now, if I told you before about Arthur J. Shell, he was the attorney that the former Ms. Mack had hired to handle Mr. Mack's case to find out, what happened to Mr. Mack. In turn, Mr. Shell had set up for a reporter from the Miami Herald to come up and do a story on Mr. Mack. Well, the reporter was ran away, and eventually I told you Mr. Shell was ran away. Now, why can't people see something's not right about this picture? The man couldn't cut his throat. He couldn't cut his esophagus out of his body. The man, he never was under the influence of any alcohol. Why can't people see that this is such a great cover-up? And don't you understand, again, that was covered. It will be uncovered. I mean, if you believe in God, well then you got to understand all these things that are happening, they're supposed to happen, and that the truth is going to surface up. And it's just going to be a terrible day for the ones that were a part of this wicked scheme. Also, I want to tell you something that's very, very strange and true. Ever since you see, before Miss Mack, the former Miss Mack received a phone call from relatives in Cotton Plant telling her that Mr. Mack was dead. At Miss Mack's bedroom window, there were a bunch of mockingbirds. And I mean, they were out there like they were fighting. They were just twerping and going off, just twerping and going off. Right after that, Miss Mack got the call. Now, over the course of the years, whenever Miss Mack seems to have left this situation alone, a mockingbird returns to the home. The mockingbird perches on the front porch, screams, awning, and just twerps and twerps and twerps until it can get Miss Betty's attention. Miss Betty comes, the bird doesn't get scared and fly away. The bird sits there and the bird twerps. Then also the bird comes to Miss Betty's bedroom window and chirps and chirps and chirps. You know why? Same mockingbird. You might not believe it. Oh well. But anyway, that bird is probably working through the spirit of Mr. Mack, saying, look, get me justice. I need justice. This is a very, very true story what I'm telling you about the mockingbird. It kind of reminded me when Miss Mack first, before Miss Mack had first told me about it, it reminded me of Gregory Peck's movie, To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know why that kept popping in my head. But, you know, as I said before, the family out in Cotton Plant, the relatives, they took so much from this man's children. They took money. They took property. As a matter of fact, one of Mr. Mack's relatives, I'm sure, played a part in breaking into the home where I had these documents because they just figured I had something on them. But it's not anything on them. It's not anything on them. It's conscience whooping them. Just like when I went to the Marion County Sheriffs Department and met with the Lieutenant of Major Crime, Sandlin, you know, sometimes guilt is hard, and his was written all over his face in a way that his conscience, it couldn't hide it. It just couldn't hide it. His conscience was bothering him, and his face couldn't hide what was on his conscience. I'm not saying that he had any direct involvement in Mr. Mack's death, but he's a part of that organization that has covered up this man's death, and are continuing to cover up this man's death. The KKK, like I said, they had promised to kill this man, and they did kill him. I want you all to forget again what I said, that maybe 5 years after Mr. Mack's murder, his girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, and 5 or 6 of her kids were trapped in a house in Chatmile, Florida. They burned to death. Who would do something like this to somebody? Only cowards, Klansmen. That's what I told you. That's why they dress up in the sheets and the hoods, because they're ashamed and they're scared, and they don't want nobody to know that they're the ones that are doing all this old wicked stuff. Something else around here in Marion County. But you should know now that this is getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're not going to stop until we get justice for Mr. Mack. You must always understand that. So you're going to always see something on YouTube about Mr. Mack, Again, you know, it's sad. The relatives even took land, sold land that had belonged to Mr. Mack's mother, and never gave any of his children any of the proceeds of that. But I'm going to tell you something else. Those relatives out in Cotton Plant, I'm not saying they had anything to do with his murder, but I'm saying that they know something about his murder before it happened. And still today, they know something after he was murdered. They know the truth. The truth is going to come out. Thank you, America.